All right, today's Khan Academy that we're working on is called Converting Between Slope-Intercept and Standard Form. I think before we kind of talk about how to do this, first of all, you're going to see this equation right here, 4x plus y equals -1. So I'm going to bring up a smartboard here, and you can see that same equation right here, 4x plus y equals -1. But before I get to that, I should probably talk about the different forms. If you remember yesterday, we talked about this form right here, this point slope form, which was y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. And we talked about how to convert from this form back into a slope-intercept form. This is the form you're most aware of and the one that you've been dealing with most. This y equals mx plus b right there. So what is standard form? Well, standard form is the form that's called ax plus by equals c. Now, what does that all stand for? Well, the a stands for the number, the coefficient that's in front of the x. By the way, anytime you have a number that's in front of a variable, it's called a coefficient. So a is the coefficient or the number in front of the x. So like in this case, that number here would be the number 4 would be the coefficient in front of the x. B would be the number that's in front of the y value or the other. So b is another coefficient, but it's the coefficient of y. You'll notice right here, there is no coefficient in front of this y. Well, if there's not a coefficient, think to yourself, what number times y would equal itself? Hopefully, you said the number 1. So it's the same as having a 1 times y. 1 times anything is just itself, so we don't put it in. So whenever you don't see a number in front of that y, you know the number is the number 1. And then finally, c is the term that's all by itself on the right side of the equation. So in this case, that number would be the -1. All right, so now that you kind of understand what the standard form of a line is, our goal is to take this standard form equation and convert it into a slope-intercept form equation. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to solve for y. You'll notice here we have a y by itself, and our goal is to get y all by itself and everything else on the right side of the equation. So let's start with this one now. Currently, we have a positive 4x being added to our y. So what's the opposite of a positive 4x? You've got it. It's a negative 4x. And remember, whatever I do to one side of the equation, I must do to the other. So we'll subtract 4x over here. Now, this is where some people will make mistakes if they don't really pay too close of attention to this. So please pay attention to what I'm about to do. On this side of the equation, the positive 4x and the negative 4x will cancel each other. So the only thing I have left over here is a y equals. Now, some people will try and combine a -1 and a -4x. But if you remember, these are not like terms. I cannot combine them. You also should remember that we've always talked about that the variable should come first. So the -4x should come first, followed by the constant, which is our -1 right there. So now you'll notice that we've converted this 4x plus y equals -1 into a y equals -4x minus 1. So if we take that answer, and I'll kind of drag this down here so we can see it, we will go up here. Oh, I guess I can't see that very well. In here, what is the slope of this y equals -4x minus 1? Hopefully you all know by now that the slope is the number that comes in front of the x variable. So in this case, the slope is the -4. And then, what is the b? Well, the b was the constant all by itself over here, which is our -1. So we'll put into here -1 for our constant. And we get the answer correct. So let's pull up another one. Now, you're going to notice that they gave us this equation, y equals -3x plus 3. That is in slope-intercept form. So we're going to take this up here, and we are going to recreate this one, if I can do this quickly enough. I believe it was y equals -3x plus 3. Let's go make sure I'm correct on that, because I am a little tired. We just had conferences last night. -3x plus 3. Hey, I did get it right. So now our goal on this one is to convert this slope-intercept form into a standard form. So let's begin. Standard form, you'll notice that we have all of our x terms and all of our y terms on the left side of the equation. So we need to take this -3x that's on the right side, and we need to move it to the right side. So how do we do that? Well, here's how we do that. We are going to take that negative 3x and do the opposite. Well, what's the opposite of negative 3x? Hopefully you said that that would be a plus 3x. Whatever we do to one side, we must do to the other side. So we'll take this right here, and we'll add that. I'll put a little underline on there. And I cannot combine my x terms and my y terms. They're not like terms. So what I end up with is a positive 3x and a positive y. And that all equals what was left over on this side of the equation, which is a positive 3. Now, when you're in standard form, there are two rules that you should understand. Rule number 1 is that there can be no fractions in standard form. This a, b, and c, we cannot have any fractions. Well, we're okay there. We have no fractions. Rule number 2 is that you can have no negatives for your a term. The others can be negative, but the a term must be positive. So this very first term right here must be positive. I don't know if that's truly true for everything, but I've noticed with Khan Academy it's definitely true on there. So we're going to go with it. There can be no negative terms for your a term. Since the 3 on the 3x is positive, then we do know that that is, we can go with it. So our a term is 3. You'll notice our b term, you don't see a number in front of the y. We just talked about that. If you don't see a number in front of the y, you should know that that is the number 1. And then the constant on the right side of the equation, or your c term, is another positive 3. So it's 3, 3, 1, 3 for our 3 answers. So we'll plug in 3 for a, we'll plug in 1 for b, we'll plug in 3 for c. And you'll notice, yes, once again, we get our answer correct. All right. We're back to another example having a standard form, 3x plus 2y equals 1. I like this one because there's just a touch more work to do on this one, so let's take care of that. 3x plus 2y equals 1. So, all right, so we have 3x plus 2y equals 1. Now, in order to get into slope-intercept form, we said we have to have y by itself on the left side of the equation. So we have a positive 3x. How do we get rid of it? You should be saying, well, we got to subtract 3x. Whatever we do to one side of the equation, we must do to the other side. Perfect. We'll draw a little underline on this one right there. And we get rid of the 3x. What we are left with on this side of the equation is a positive 2y equals negative 3x. And that is a positive 1. We're not done. Some people might think they're done at this point. Well, we got the y on the left side, but it's not alone. Currently, this y on the left side is being multiplied by a 2. You'll notice in slope-intercept form, this y up here is not being multiplied by anything. Well, it's actually being multiplied by 1. So we've got to get this down to a 1y. So currently, the y is being multiplied by 2. So the opposite of multiply by 2 would be to divide by 2. Now here's kind of the tricky part, and here's what I want you to understand. We're going to divide by 2 on this side, but I'm going to slip this over a little more into the middle here. The reason I did that is because we're not just dividing the negative 3x by 2, but we're also dividing the positive 1 by 2. So you're going to notice on the left side of the equation, 2 divided by 2 is 1, or 1y. So we finally got that to the point where we want it. A negative 3 divided by a positive 2 is a negative 3, oops, I forgot the negative in there, negative 3 halves. So there's our slope. But you'll also notice that a positive 1 right here divided by a 2 is going to be a positive 1 half. So in this case, things are a little bit more complicated in that our slope is a negative 3 halves, and our y-intercept is a positive 1 half. So when we come in down here to enter our answer for this one, I guess I really can't see it. You're just going to have to remember it with me. It's a negative 3 halves for the slope and a positive 1 half. So let's go enter that. The slope was a negative 3 halves, and the slope and the y-intercept is a positive 1 half. Hopefully that makes sense to you. And then finally, the last one here that we'll do is y equals negative x minus 3. So currently this is in slope-intercept form. We need to get this to standard form By the way, it says here assume A is positive, so that kind of gets back to that whole point for Khan Academy. They want your A term, your very first term, to always be positive. I can't remember what that term was. You can tell I'm tired. Y equals negative x minus 3. So let's do that one quick. Let me just go down from this one. So y equals negative x minus 3. I'm just going to verify that was it. Y equals negative x minus 3. Yes, it was. So now we can solve this one. Remember, to get this into standard form, we have to have the x's and the y's on the same side. So the opposite of a negative x is I need to add x to both sides. Add x to both sides. When I do that, and this one's actually fairly simple, when I do that there, I cannot combine an x and a y tile, so I've got a positive x, a positive y tile on the left side of the equation. The two x's on the right side cancel, so the only thing left is my negative 3. So I'm now back into standard form, where x and y's are on the left side and my constants on the right side. We know that x has to be positive, and it is in this case, so that's a good thing. If x had been negative, I would multiply everything through by negative 1. Basically, what that means is I would change everything to the opposite. So if you ever ended up, for example, with a negative x over here, what you would do is you would change everything to the opposite. So if that were my equation, negative x plus y equals negative 3, you would multiply everything through by a negative 1, or just change everything to the absolute opposite. So it would be a positive x minus y would equal a positive 3. If that makes sense. So if you end up with a negative x, change everything to the opposite of what it is, and then you've got your what your numbers would be. But we did not have a negative x in this case, so I'm not going to do that here. So x is alone, so we know that's a 1. Y is alone, so we know that's a 1, and then we have a negative 3 right there. So that would be our A, B, C term. So we know it's a 1 for A, 1 for B, and negative 3 for C. Again, I don't like making mistakes. I'm going to double check that. 1, 1, negative 3. 1, 1, negative 3. Perfect. Can you see how often I double check my work? And I'm a math teacher. Maybe many of you should start thinking about doing the same thing with your work. There you go. We get it perfect. Of course, that's me why I always get my answers right. All right. Hopefully that explains converting between slope-intercept form and standard form and going back and forth on that. That's your Khan Academy due for today. Work hard on that, and we will see you in class tomorrow. Bye-bye.